everybody, I am looking forward to telling you a little bit about my inquiry project and what I have come up with so far. So my inquiry really began when my group read the process pedagogy chapter early on in the semester, and I was reading about the concept of process and the concept of valuing that over the product. And as the writer was talking about the idea of this keyhole structure essay where you have this thesis and 3 body paragraphs and a conclusion, and it's all restated at the conclusion, and so I really started to think about how I teach writing and how writing is taught in general. And so my questions kind of formed from that idea. So it is, what, if anything, are students learning about the writing process from creating a thesis statement and developing a 5-paragraph type argument? So as I started to think through this, and I talked with Dr. Hartman and I talked with others, the question that kept coming up for me was, why do I teach it this way? And I couldn't come up with a fantastic answer, and so that's the inquiry. So another question going along with that is, how, if at all, does this type of structured, formulaic writing affect the way students learn to construct their ideas? So is it helping them? Is there a positive effect here? And this kind of led to some secondary thoughts and some ways in which to think about it. If I'm teaching this way as a teacher of writing, am I doing what I should be as a teacher? And so what's the goal in teaching students to write within this very structured kind of setting? Why, if at all, is this type of writing so fundamental or foundational to writing? What's the rationale on that? And then if it's not, what happens beyond this kind of a structure, and how do I go about teaching writing at that point? So I'm sure many of you have seen images like this, graphic organizers that show how to organize the 5-paragraph essay structure, what that should look like. You may have even put them in front of your students, or they've had them put in front of you, and most of these are very positive images associated with it. There are a couple that show maybe the negatives or the weaknesses of the 5-paragraph theme as well. So I really began the primary research part of my inquiry project by looking specifically at my classroom and my approach to writing. So looking at student essay samples, interviewing my English department chair on her thoughts on the process, and then observing my students as they were writing and thinking through that as well. So my writing assignment design and my inquiry project had a lot of overlap. So as I was thinking through that whole process of how do I teach writing, how do I deal with writing, I looked specifically at my students' essay samples as they finished those up. And so in looking at one particular class set, by and large, I saw a significant increase in student writing assignment scores, particularly for students who tried something outside of the typical essay structure. So when I assigned the writing assignment design, they had an option on how they wanted to present their information. And so my students who did a more multimodal approach, my students who expanded the typical essay structure, seemed to have a much higher rate of success than those who just stuck with what they knew in the traditional format. Additionally, the process work played a major role across the board. That was something I really wanted to emphasize with the writing assignment design, but I noticed how much of a part it played in them feeling successful about their writing. So students who engaged more fully in the process did better on this assignment as well. And so I was really impressed to see these findings in my own students. And so while I was really impressed with the higher scores, it was also really encouraging to see students who feel so frustrated trying to fit all of the right information into the right slots of a traditional essay flourish in being able to write something that is not as traditional. So whereas the 5-paragraph essay for one student in particular doesn't allow him much success, he found great success in this particular writing assignment, and not only just in something he enjoyed more, but he effectively conveyed his thoughts. He was able to share an argument with me and really support that based on the novel we read, and so that was really encouraging to see. So my interview with my department chair was also really, really beneficial. She teaches freshman English as well as AP Comp, as well as being our English department chair at my school. And we just had a really good conversation about her thoughts about the 5-paragraph essay specifically. And so I started out by asking her on her initial thoughts on using it in the classroom. And this is what she said. The 5-paragraph essay is helpful for students early on, and she's thinking 5th, 6th, 7th, to begin to think about a pattern, a method, and developing this pattern of organizing your thoughts. She said there's a benefit of teaching students how to think logically through issues. And by the time students are AP students, when she has them, she expects the thesis to be less obvious. It doesn't have to be the last sentence of the introduction. It doesn't need to be underlined, but it should be more self-evident at this point. She greatly valued the process over the product. Once again, no matter how you're approaching the writing product, the process is important. And then she talked about the best approach to teaching writing as this organic process. In AP composition, she said students write an essay a week. We use a workshop approach with a specific focus for the week. Students read other writing samples, but they are not given any specific model for accomplishing the writing task. So I thought it was interesting that while she thinks that the 5-paragraph essay is a good foundational starting point, it should only be the starting point. The students should build, and there should be lots of opportunities for students to express themselves, and there shouldn't be a mold that students have to fit in order to be successful writers. And I also got to observe my students as they were working through the process work of this writing assignment that we were working on, and I discussed some theme ideas with my students, and then I gave them the opportunity to contemplate them and to bounce some ideas off of each other as groups. And so there was lots of silence at first, but then as they began to collaborate, I heard comments such as, "You're smart, what do you think?" or pointing to one particular person in the group, and I discovered that they were really concerned about getting it right immediately. There was no room for error, there was no room for thinking it through, and so it really took some coaching and some modeling, so we ended up writing some things on the board and doing some of it together in order to get them to tease out some ideas and some possibilities, even if they ultimately didn't go with them. By the second and third times that we went through this process, we did this over the course of a couple of days, they exhibited more excitement for the process. They began to think about the possibilities, even those that were a little further out there or out on a limb or outside of their comfort zone. They started thinking through the possibilities of working with those concepts. And students did immediately want to jump to the product. They wanted the yes, the no. They didn't want to explore, but I found that as they started to explore, these really wonderful ideas came to the surface. Prior to reading the process pedagogy chapter, I don't know that I'd really stopped and thought that there was anything wrong with this traditional type of essay structure. And so after reading it, I really wanted to learn more and wasn't really sure where to start. And so Dr. Hartman led me to the article first listed here on this page, The 5-Paragraph Essay and the Deficit Model of Education. And this really talks about the myth of the 5-paragraph essay and why it might not be quite as effective as so many believe it to be. And it's really written as this oppositional piece to what Sow, I don't know if that's pronounced correctly, and Smith have said in these other 2 articles defending the 5-paragraph essay and in defense of the 5-paragraph essay. And so listed here on this first page of the UNC Charlotte Writing Project article is this quotation. They, being those writing in opposition, they speak a logic that is important to challenge precisely because this logic perpetuates the common sense myth that the 5-paragraph theme is an actual form, and that forming and writing is simply slotting information into prefabricated formulas rather than a complex process of meaning-making and negotiation between a writer's purposes and audience's needs. And so as I read this, this really became the crux of my thought process. because writing is so much more than just fitting the right comments and the right statements and the right ideas and the right transitions into the right places. It is this complex process, and it should be a little labor intensive at times. And so this really began my search and my jumping off point in thinking through these things. So after reading the first article, I needed to go back and see what they were opposing. So I read Sal and Smith's articles and looked at their defenses of the 5-paragraph essay. So I read Smith's, and her writing is really coming from the aspect of looking at the SAT writing section and preparing students for college writing. And she states that students who know the 5-paragraph essay intimately are more prepared to take on the challenge of college-level writing. The tragedy happens when students can't organize their thoughts at all. And so she really looks at the 5-paragraph essay as this basic form of writing, basics of essay writing, that is necessary in order to kind of be the jumping off point to further writing. Sal, who I'm probably butchering her name, approaches it from a slightly different place, as she is dealing with at-risk students and thinking through that process of teaching them to write well. And she really compares the 5-paragraph essay to the building of a home. And she says, one Sunday, as she was watching Extreme Makeover Home Edition, I realized that every house was built in the same fashion. Every time. A foundation is poured, walls are constructed and raised, and a roof is framed and attached. After that, the creativity of the crew sets in, establishing room placement and sizes, paint colors, fixtures, and all of the characteristics that make a house a home. And she really talks about the necessity of having this strong foundation, this great structure, in order for students then to be able to go beyond that and add their creativity and the flourishes and all of the things that make a student's writing uniquely their own. As I began to start making some conclusions and coming up with some ideas, I first and foremost realized I know nothing. As I delved into one side of the argument, I saw the advantages and I saw the possibilities, and I understood the concept. I saw the way my students' writing improved moving outside of the traditional, but yet I still really struggled to completely eliminate this traditional kind of writing. Not that it should always be taught, and not that it should be taught continuously year after year after year, but I can't quite throw it away, so I'm still working through that. But I think that there are many successful ways to teach writing other than this 5-paragraph essay type structure. So I'm looking for some answers and some feedback from you all. So do I need to focus on any other issues more specifically beyond the 5-paragraph essay? I didn't really start out intending just to focus that direction, but that kind of tends to be where I'm headed. Also, I feel like I may have too many sources. Do you have any opinions on maybe what I should stick with or pursue further or nix completely? I didn't even get fully into everything, but any opinions there? And then what do you wish you knew more about? As many of you have mentioned, there are lots of possibilities and ideas kind of floating around. And so is there something that I quickly addressed that you would like to know more about for the final write-up? And then finally, do you have an opinion on the issue? Do you love the traditional format? Do you detest it? Somewhere in between? What are your thoughts? So looking forward to your feedback. Thanks.